Martin Bergen was born on October 25, 1871, in North Brookfield, Massachusetts, to Irish immigrant parents, Michael and Anne Bergen. His parents had settled in the U.S. shortly after the Civil War. Michael supported the family by working as a shoemaker in a local factory. Martin was the third of 6 children, with only 2 boys in the family, himself and his younger brother Bill. As a teenager, Marty began playing baseball with a local team, the Brookfields, where one of his teammates was the future legendary manager of the Philadelphia Athletics, Connie Mack. Known for his exceptional fielding skills, Bergen was also prone to obsessing over small issues and had a combative personality, which diminished his overall enjoyment of the game. Martin Bergen's professional baseball career began in 1892 when he became the catcher for the Salem Witches of the New England League, appearing in 59 games with a .247 batting average. After the season, he returned to play with the Brookfields, a tradition he continued in the following years. In 1893, he spent most of the season with his team in Northampton, with a brief stint playing 3 games for the Wilkes-Barre Coal Barons of the Eastern League. During that season, on July 11th, Bergen married Hattie Gaines, who had moved to North Brookfield the previous year to work at a flour mill. The couple had 3 children, Martin Jr., Florence, and Joseph. They made their home in North Brookfield, buying property on Boynton Street, which they named Snowball Farm. In 1894, Connie Mack, now the manager of the Pittsburgh Pirates in the National League, attempted to draft Bergen. However, the contract was voided when the Pirates illegally signed him to a minor league team, Lewiston of the New England League. Despite this, Bergen played for Lewiston, appearing in 97 games and batting a .321. By 1895, interest in Bergen grew among high-level teams. Both the Washington Senators of the National League and the Kansas City Blues of the Western League drafted him. Baseball officials assigned him to the Blues, where he performed well, batting a .372 over 138 games with 118 runs and 188 hits. However, his unpredictable temperament caused issues. In the middle of the season, Bergen abruptly left the team over a perceived slight and didn't return for over a week. Despite this, his performance drew the attention of Kid Nichols, who recommended him to Frank Seeley, manager of the Boston Beaneaters. The team drafted Bergen, though owner Arthur Soden had personally visited North Brookfield to assure him that the club valued him ahead of the 1896 season. Marty Bergen became one of the Boston Beaneaters' primary catchers in 1896, making his major league debut and playing 65 games with a .269 batting average. In 1897, Bergen took on more catching duties, playing 87 games and batting a .248 as the Beaneaters won the National League pennant but lost the Temple Cup to the Baltimore Orioles. The 1898 season was his best, as he played in 125 games, batting .280 with 60 RBIs, helping the Beaneaters win the National League pennant again. Despite hip problems, Bergen continued playing in 1899, though his appearances dropped to 72 games. He batted a .258, and the Beaneaters finished second in the league. Over 4 seasons with the Beaneaters, Bergen appeared in 344 games, mainly as a catcher, with a career batting average of .265, 180 runs, 339 hits, and 176 RBIs. His volatile personality and injuries, however, affected both his performance and relationship with his teammates. Marty Bergen's strong arm and hard-playing style were admired by his teammates, but his relationship with them quickly deteriorated. A May 1896 article described Bergen as unpopular with his fellow players, noting his sullen and sarcastic personality, his tendency to nurse imagined grievances, and his lack of social interactions with the team. Tension escalated in 1898 when Bergen slapped teammate Vic Willis during breakfast and later threatened to kill his teammates. Despite this, his skills on the field were acknowledged, with one anonymous player stating that, while Bergen caused trouble off the field, his talent during games was undeniable. By 1899, Bergen's mental health worsened. After undergoing a difficult hip surgery in January, he began experiencing hallucinations, believing enemies were trying to poison him. In April, while on the road with his team, Bergen learned that one of his sons had died of diphtheria. He was given time off, but returned 2 weeks later, only to continue clashing with his teammates, whom he believed were mocking him. He became paranoid, walking and sitting in a way that allowed him to see potential assassins approaching. Boston's team president even advised the players to avoid him due to concerns over his behavior. In July of 1899, Bergen abruptly left the team during a pennant race, walking off a train and returning to North Brookfield, leaving the Bean Eaters with just a backup catcher. Tim Murnane, a Boston Globe reporter, went to North Brookfield to convince Bergen to return. Bergen complained of mistreatment by his teammates and injuries that required treatment from his local physician. After a week and a half, Bergen rejoined the team, receiving cheers from fans. However, his erratic behavior continued. He disappeared in September and was removed from the October game after avoiding pitches, claiming he was dodging knife thrusts from invisible attackers. Bergen was aware of his mental state and sought help from clergy and doctors, but refused to take prescribed medication, fearing they were poisoned. Following the death of his son, Bergen often requested time off to visit home, and when denied, he went regardless. He was fined for his absences, which deepened his resentment. By the end of the year, most of his teammates avoided him entirely, with some vowing not to return to the team in 1900 if Bergen was still on the roster due to his increasingly erratic behavior. In January of 1900, Marty Bergen, at 28 years old, was found dead at his home in North Brookfield, Massachusetts, in an apparent murder-suicide. His neighbors expressed shock, noting that he had appeared unusually cheerful and devoted to his family before the tragedy. According to the medical examiner, Bergen killed his wife and 2 children with an axe before using a straight razor to take his own life. His father discovered the bodies, and the New York Times reported gruesome details of the scene. The little boy, Bergen's 3-year-old son, was lying on the floor with a large wound in the head. Mrs. Bergen's skull was terribly crushed, having evidently been struck more than one blow by the infuriated husband. The appearance of the little girl, his 6-year-old daughter, found on the kitchen floor next to Bergen, also showed that a number of savage blows had been rained upon the top and side of her head. Bergen's throat had been cut with a razor, and the head was nearly severed. In actuality, the razor cut likely would not have been able to sever enough ligaments to go deep enough to nearly sever Bergen's head, but it would have created a lot of blood from slicing the jugular vein and carotid artery, making it appear that the head had been nearly severed from the body. Following his death, it was revealed that Bergen had been suffering from bouts of severe melancholy and showing signs of mental instability since the fall of 1899. Dr. Carl Salzman of Harvard Medical School later speculated that Bergen may have had schizophrenia, while baseball historian Frank Russo suggested he could have had clinical depression or borderline personality disorder. Bergen and his family were buried in St. Joseph's Cemetery in North Brookfield, with a memorial erected in 1934 by Connie Mack and George M. Cohan, honoring his contributions to baseball. He also received a few Hall of Fame votes in the late 1930s, though not enough for induction. Marty's death prevented him from ever facing his brother Bill, also a major league catcher, in a game. Bill later reflected on his brother's struggles, remarking, "It was as if he was possessed. The demons got him and never let him go." Mary Mabel Bennett was born to Charles and Johanna Bennett. Her father, reportedly struggling with mental illness and alcoholism, was unable to maintain steady employment. This instability led to abusive behavior, and on several occasions, he attempted to take her life. At 15, Mary Bennett married Marcus Rogers. Known for her immaturity and restlessness, she would often leave home when upset with her husband. In 1901, she gave birth to a daughter. When the baby was 6 months old, Mary rushed to a neighbor's house, crying that she had accidentally dropped the child. Tragically, the infant died from a fractured skull. Despite Mary's claims, her husband's family suspected she had killed the baby intentionally. Their suspicions grew when Marcus Rogers fell violently ill after drinking tea that Mary had prepared. Following this, Mary moved out, though her husband still hoped for a reconciliation. Marcus Rogers found work as a laborer in Hoosick Falls, New York, while Mary lived in Bennington, Vermont. Despite Marcus pleading for her to join him, Mary refused. Instead, she became involved with Morris Knapp, another laborer, and two brothers, Leon and Levi Parham, who lived in the same boarding house as Knapp. Mary first approached Levi Parham, offering him $500 to kill her husband. Levi, intoxicated at the time, initially agreed, but later backed out, believing it to be idle talk. He never reported the conversation to the police. Undeterred, Mary then proposed the murder to Leon Parham in early August of 1902 while they were in bed together. Leon agreed, even though Mary made it clear her motive was to free herself to marry Knapp. They set their plan in motion, arranging to meet Marcus at a picnic grove in Bennington on the evening of August 12th. When Marcus arrived, Leon was present, but Marcus did not question his presence. Mary pretended to be happy to see her husband and talked of reconciliation. During the picnic, Mary offered to show Marcus a rope trick she claimed to have learned. She tied Leon's wrists several times, and each time he easily broke free, with Mary feigning disappointment. She then challenged Marcus to try the trick, tying his wrists as he also broke free. Eventually, Leon tied Marcus's wrists behind his back, and this time, Marcus could not escape. Mary then pulled a vial of chloroform from her purse and forced Marcus to inhale it for about 20 minutes until he stopped struggling. She searched his pockets, taking his life insurance payment book. Afterward, she and Leon rolled his body into the nearby river, where Marcus drowned. To stage the scene, Mary tacked his hat to a tree and left a forged suicide note. The investigation commenced following the discovery of the body, leading to Parham's full confession. During Mary Rogers' trial in 1904, Parham served as the prosecution's key witness. His testimony, along with his age, spared him from the death penalty, resulting in a life imprisonment sentence. In contrast, Mary Rogers was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death by hanging. After Rogers' conviction, there was a concerted effort to have her death sentence commuted. State Representative Frank C. Archibald of Manchester, who also served as one of Rogers' attorneys, introduced a bill in the Vermont House of Representatives to reduce her sentence to life imprisonment. The bill was sent to the Judiciary Committee on October 12, 1904. On December 6, the committee reported in favor of its passage. However, when the bill was put to a vote in the House on December 7th, it was defeated by a margin of 139 to 91. On December 9th, Representative Archibald proposed a joint resolution in both the Vermont House and Senate to investigate Rogers' physical and mental condition at the time of the crime and her current state. The resolution called for a report on her condition to be submitted to the governor. It also stated that if it was determined that Rogers was mentally or physically unsound at the time of the crime or at present, a reprieve should be requested to delay her execution until after the 1906 Vermont legislative session. While the House adopted this resolution, the Senate did not. On May 30, 1905, Governor Charles J. Bell granted a reprieve to Rogers after the Vermont Supreme Court denied her appeal with a 5-2 vote. This reprieve was intended to allow her case to be heard by the United States Supreme Court. The Supreme Court heard the case on November 6 and ruled on November 27 that it could not find any violation of Rogers' federal constitutional rights by the proceedings of the executive or judicial branches of the state of Vermont. Following the U.S. Supreme Court's decision, Governor Bell signed Rogers' execution warrant, scheduling her execution for December 8, 1905. On December 7th, Rogers asked if the gallows were being erected, despite efforts to muffle the noise of construction. During the 10 days between the signing of the warrant and her execution, she ate and slept well, but declined breakfast on the morning of her execution. On the day of her scheduled execution, Governor Bell granted an appeal from Rogers' counsel at 8 a.m. However, he found no grounds to commute her sentence. With no new evidence presented, he refused to stay the execution, and later that day, Rogers was hanged at the Vermont State Prison. She was pronounced dead at 1:17 p.m. A scandal erupted later regarding the circumstances of her execution. Reports indicated that the executioner used a rope that stretched when Rogers was dropped from the gallows, causing her to strangle as her feet scraped the floor. After several minutes, sheriff's deputies pulled on the end of the rope until she was fully suspended, holding it in place until she finally died. Rogers was buried at St. Mary's Cemetery in Hoosick Falls, New York.